here's what we're going to be here's the structure of how we're going to be walking through this presentation today. We're going to start with kind of an overview of OTIF if anyone's kind of really green and new to this whole conversation to compliance at Walmart. Then we'll look at some updates and new processes. We'll finally get into kind of the thing that people tend to be most curious about: how to dispute with your buyer, how to dispute with HighRadius. Those are the two primary means of disputing. And then we'll dig into some kind of real world examples, some real life scenarios that suppliers have run into recently. And we'll finish up with the Q&A before we go into Parker's demo at the end. So if any of you are interested in OTIF Radar, the product that SupplyPike has, stick around after noon, and Parker will kind of guide us through that as well. But yeah, that's the plan for today.
Yeah, and we're super excited to have Parker here with us. I think he's going to be a huge benefit for also helping answer some questions, since he is the product manager of our OTIF Radar application, which helps with OTIF. So excited to have him here today. I think this is the first one you've done, right, Parker?
Yes, this is my first one, so my debut. So yeah, excited to be here and help answer questions and provide my knowledge.
Perfect. Awesome. All right.
So we love to have product people help, because they are in the trenches and they always know what they're talking about, unlike us marketing people who just make things up all the time. Just kidding. Here's some frequently asked questions that we have about these webinars. We get these all the time, and just to kind of address it up front. You're already familiar with the chat, probably, if you answered our question about New Year's resolutions. The chat is for everyone. That's for if you have any helpful insights that you would like to share from your own personal experience, or if you'd like to answer a question or something like that for someone else, that can go in the chat. That one's public and kind of visible to everyone there. But if you have more of a formal question for any of us about one of the slides that we provided, or about an OTIF kind of more in the weeds, more detailed question that you have for us, put that in the Q&A section, and we will either answer it at a section where it's relevant or answer it at the end, bring it up later on. Some of them we can type answers to also, but we like to bring them up just in case, someone else has that question also. We can answer it that way. So that's the difference between those two ways of communicating with us. Also, you will receive a copy of the slide deck, so don't worry about taking too vigorous of notes throughout this process. We also have a YouTube channel now that we're now uploading our webinars to YouTube. So if you want to hold on to this for training purposes for someone later on, go ahead and subscribe to SupplyPike's YouTube, and you'll also be able to kind of stay up to date with that as we go. There's more on that later, though, so we can cover that then as well. Alrighty, so here's a little introduction to SupplyPike for those of you who are new. SupplyPike, we like to help suppliers reduce revenue loss. That's our main goal now, and these are some of our partners that we've worked with in the past and that we continue to work with, that we've been able to help them with a variety of issues, whether it's compliance, like we're going to be talking about today, or just more standard AP deductions. These are the people that we've kind of been working with in the retail space for a while now. And with that, I believe, Melody, you can take it away.
Awesome. All right. Super excited to go over OTIF today with you guys. I hope that y'all are just as excited. All right. So first, we're going to dive into what OTIF is. So just a high level. What's the difference between deductions, OTIF fines, and SWEP fines? So we like to call SQEP SWEP. So if you hear me saying that, that is what I'm referring to. But high level deductions, these are AP deductions that come off the check. So this is going to be like shortage deductions that you might be receiving. This might be like allowances, things that are going to, whenever you're getting paid, you're going to see a little note in there that says like a code 22 or a code 25. Those are AP deductions. So these are actually disputed through ADPD. So that's the That's the accounts payable dispute portal. So I'm realizing that we have a little typo in there, but we actually have tons of webinars on all of that. We just did one just a couple of weeks ago with the news that came out that Walmart is no longer allowing for suppliers to go through the settlement program. So if you guys are not familiar with settlement, that is where before you were able to kind of batch your deductions in a quarterly cadence and send those off to Walmart and say, I would like this amount of money back. This is how many of them I think are invalid. And then Walmart would come back, you would have some negotiation. They would ask for a few proof documents through sampling, and then you would settle it that way. However, that's now going away. You will no longer be able to use the settlement program. You will have to dispute through APDP. So like I said, Peter can actually probably share a lot of that information in the chat, but we just had 2 webinars on that process and how you can go through that. But that's not what we're going to be covering today. Today, we're going to be covering OTIF fines. So what are OTIF fines? They are going to be the AR charges that are sent to the supplier. So it's not a shortage deduction. It's not going to be those allowances. It's not going to be pricing discrepancies. It's not going to be any of that. It's a specific program that Walmart has implemented that goes through the AR process. So we're going to be diving in today how you can actually go and dispute those either through HighRadius or with your buyer. There's not really a specific formula that we're going to be going over. Walmart previously over the past, few years, whenever they released OTIF, they had no formal dispute process. It was always, if you were going to get any of the fines reversed, it was going through your buyer. Just recently, I believe it was last summer, they actually introduced going through HighRadius. And so we're going to be going over both processes here today on how you can kind of recover some of that money and how we've seen suppliers have success with recovering that money. Lastly, SQUET fines. So this is also a new program that Walmart has introduced. It stands for Supplier Quality Excellence Program. So this is going to be where your invoices are being deducted for each defect. We also have a lot of content around what SQUET fines are in the different phases. So there are 4 phases. They've only rolled out 3 of them. The 4th phase should be coming any day now. We don't know when, but we think that it will be announced soon. And what this is there to monitor is how your packaging is, if it's up to compliance standards, as well as like ASN and a lot of information around that. So what isn't being covered in deductions, like with the different codes, or in OTIF, on time in full, they are trying to cover those other maybe issues a supplier might be facing with the SQUET program. So one interesting thing about SQUET fines is that they can actually stack on top of each other. So suppliers can be facing a pretty rough regards to whenever it comes to fines in a single invoice. And so we've seen suppliers actually see deductions, OTIF fines and SQUET fines all in the same check, where they're getting deducted, over 6% easily. So SQUET fines are also disputed in HighRadius, but there is more information that's coming out around that. All right, so let's take a deeper dive into OTIF. So OTIF is a program that Walmart introduced in order to kind of take almost like a gut check on how a supplier is performing whenever it comes to their supply chain. So, Walmart is really focused on the customer. They're wanting to make sure that the customer has the right product at the right time, and the right quantity, and they're wanting to avoid out of stocks. And so what they try to introduce is this OTIF program in order to prevent that from happening. And if it does happen, they're going to charge the supplier for what they're considering lost revenue. And so they charge you in the form of chargebacks, which can be 3% of the cost of goods sold. This is going to be on a per case basis, and there's different measurements between on time and in full. So on time, did you get it to the store? Did you get it to the DC when you said you would or when they needed it? And in full, did you ship as much as you needed to? Now, like we were talking on this previous slide, deductions will also handle shortages. So you can be receiving a code 22, 24, 25 while also getting an OTIF fine because Walmart is saying that you didn't ship everything that you said you would, or everything that they requested. And so we can really see these fines start to stack up whenever it comes to the in full portion, with deductions and OTIF fines. Okay. So what is OTIF? So OTIF is, again, going to be a percentage amount. So that's going to be how you're scored. It's the number of cases that are on time and in full divided by the number of cases that were ordered. So how successful were you in actually getting your product there when you needed to, and as much as they said you were? And the goal here, like we have down at the bottom, is that the first step of making sure that you're not experiencing OTIF fines or you're not experiencing any revenue loss is actually preventing OTIF fines. That is where we've seen suppliers have the most amount of success in having a meaningful impact on the amount of revenue that they're losing from OTIF fines. So we also have a lot of content on root cause, how to prevent them, even a deeper dive into what OTIF is and how you can analyze your OTIF scorecard. I'm sure that'll be also something that Peter can share in the chat, but the main goal that we're going for here is making sure that your OTIF score is as high as it can be so that you're not getting OTIF fines. Now, of course, Walmart makes mistakes, and changing your supply chain can be very difficult. So in the meantime, as you're getting your OTIF score up to par and getting your supply chain to where it needs to be, there are avenues for you to use, which is what we're going over today in disputing. So who does OTIF affect? So this is going to be Walmart brick and mortar and e-commerce suppliers. It's not going to impact Sam's Club. It's not going to impact DSD, direct import, international marketplace sellers. It's really going to be the people who are sending items through the Walmart DCs. So those are the main people who are going to be experiencing that. Okay, so what does it mean to be on time? So one thing that I didn't mention before is that your goal for OTIF is going to be that 98%. That is going to be for both on time and in full. That is what you're shooting for here. Now, previously, for the past couple of years, they actually had different goals for different departments, but I think it was last year, the year before last, time since COVID has been weird. They introduced where everyone has the same goal, and it's a much higher goal than they had ever had before, 98%. And so that is what you were shooting for here. So to be on time, what does that mean? That means that you need to be delivering to the DCs on time. You need to route and confirm the POs on time, and you need to ensure that POs are ready for carrier pickup. Now, that's going to depend which things or what expectations are going to apply to you based on if you're prepaid or collect. There's a lot of information on Supplier Wiki about what you should do from a root cause perspective whenever it comes if you're prepaid or collect, because on time, that metric is really going to depend, and what you can do about it is really going to depend on how you ship. Does Walmart pick up your goods, or do you ship your items to them? So those metrics are measured called prepaid on time or collect ready. Both of those goals are going to be that 98%. All right, so what does it mean to be in full? So in full, like I've been mentioning, just means that you are shipping the number of items that Walmart requested, the number of items that Walmart ordered. This is going to, it's not going to matter what department you're in or how you ship. Everyone has the same in full expectation. So are you shipping everything you said you would? This is also that 98%. You are just trying to be at 98% or above across the board. Otherwise, you're going to be getting that 3% cost of goods sold fines for every case that is over that, or yeah, over that 98%. That is not hitting that 98%. All right, so scoring OTIF. So what can lower your scores? There's a lot that can lower your scores. There's a lot of information out there. But some of the main ones that we're going to be focusing on today is if you're prepaid on time, if your cases arrive early, if they arrive late, if they're there without an appointment, that can be really impacting you. And that is actually going to be defined by the must arrive by date delivery window. So the must arrive by date, there's different windows that you have. I believe it's on a department level basis. We have the the table that will go over all of that. We'll try to send that to you guys after this, but there's a lot of information on must arrive by date. You just need to make sure that you are hitting that, you're within that window. So collect ready, how your scores can be lowered for that is if your shipment is not confirmed. So if you don't confirm your shipment by 4 p.m. Central, the day after the PO sent, then the order is not going to be ready for pickup by the appointment time. There's a whole lot of issues that will come from that. We've even seen where Walmart will send a shipment on like a holiday, or send the order on like a holiday or on the weekend. And so if your team is not working and they don't confirm it, then that's where you might be impacted by collect ready. And we've seen that fairly often. Next we got in full. So this one's pretty basic. So fewer cases arrived than what was ordered, like we talked about before, or if no cases arrived at all. So we've seen both of those happen, or Walmart says that fewer cases arrived than what was ordered, or code 25 is a very common one for AP deductions, which is actually usually an invoicing error. And so if you're sending your invoices in before the shipment gets there, then that can really be impacting your score. Okay, so that is a high-level overview of what OTIF is. Now let's get into the meat of it. So let's talk about disputing OTIF fines. There's a few updates that we're going to be going over here today. So Walmart changed their OTIF statement last January. So OTIF fines are now disputable after being invoiced, but the process is still undefined. So Walmart sent this tiny little notification in one of their documentation, didn't really announce it in a very big way, but just said, if this little FAQ type statement, are OTIF charges disputable? And it was like, yes, you can do it in HighRadius. And everyone was like, whoa, what is this? There's now an official dispute process, and Walmart's been rolling that out. They've been slowly releasing information since last year. So OTIF fines can still be disputed with your buyer, but the HighRadius is now the new option. So there's two ways that we're going to be going over it today. So disputing with your buyer is actually going to be done before the invoice, and HighRadius is going to be done after the invoice. There's a 3-month grace period if you actually are a first-time supplier, where OTIF fines are going to be waived. I would highly suggest, if you're a new Walmart supplier, that you're heavily monitoring your OTIF fines, even if you are not being impacted them, because that's a 3-month grace period where you can fix the issues that you have, so that whenever you hit past that 3-month part, you can kind of hit the ground running and you're not experiencing very heavy fines, which I know is a lot to say, because whenever you're a new supplier, there's a lot of things that they're throwing at you, but it's good to go in and check, talk to your buyer, talk to your replenishment manager, and just kind of see how you can get your supply chain in order so you won't be experiencing those fines. Okay, so what is the general OTIF dispute process? So this is going to occur on a monthly basis. You'll be receiving fines and being scored on a monthly basis. So if you're doing really well the previous month and something really bad happens, your score can dip and you will be experiencing fines. There's a 2-step defense system. I like how he phrased that. So you're going to start with your buyer. Again, this is going to be before it is invoiced, before the fine has actually hit your OTIF scorecard, and you're seeing that in HighRadius. You're going to start having conversations with your buyer. Now, if you have that conversation with your buyer and they fail to waive and the fine is actually issued, then you're going to want to dispute in HighRadius after it's actually been issued, and it's going to be in HighRadius, and we'll go through that. Oh, so I slipped one slide. Okay, so Walmart's new OTIF chargeback schedule has actually not been released yet. So this is the information, the latest information that we have. Last year, or I guess in 2022, OTIF fines were usually issued around 5 weeks after month end. We don't know if that's going to be the same pattern that they're going to be following, but that's what they were doing previously. So we're kind of keeping our eye out on that. If you guys are subscribed to Supplier Wiki, we will be updating our Walmart calendar and sending a note to you guys once we have that information. So keep an eye out on that. Okay, so going over the first part, how do you dispute OTIF fines with your buyer? So the first part, you are going to talk to your buyer. So you're going to be looking in your OTIF scorecard. You're seeing that, okay, I'm probably going to be impacted with fines. You go and message your buyer, especially if you have a good relationship with them. And you have about 2 weeks after you see the projected fine to when the fine is actually invoiced to actually kind of prove your case to your buyer, why you think you should have this fine reversed. So if the buyer actually approves the dispute, the OTIF scorecard is not going to reflect the fines. So you're not going to see that in there. Communication with your buyer in this portion is very important. Not everyone has the best relationship with their buyer. If you think that this is going to damage your relationship with your buyer, then I would avoid this. And I would not bug or bother your buyer very regularly with these issues. If you are always experiencing OTIF fines and you're always going to them and saying, I need this reversed, I need this reversed, that can really put damage your relationship with them. And that shouldn't always be your first line of defense whenever it comes to OTIF fines. Prevention is key. Bothering your buyer is something that should kind of be used as almost a last resort. But for big fines, we have seen, or extreme circumstances, we have seen where suppliers have been able to get large amounts of fines disputed with their buyer and reversed. So what is the dispute format that you should email to your buyer? So you're going to want to email all of the PO numbers that are being disputed. You're going to want to give all of the supporting documentation, detailed dispute reasoning. So what this looks like is you're really trying to prove your case to your buyer as best you can. That means including all of the information that they would need in order to make the most well-informed decision. Focusing on, okay, this is why I think that these OTIF fines are correct, or why I think you guys should reverse these OTIF fines, and giving them all of the information that they need so that they can communicate what amounts and what POs actually need to be reversed for OTIF. Okay, so this is the OTIF buyer payback request. This is actually, this is a template that we haven't seen. Not every supplier has access to or should be using. We just wanted to kind of highlight it here because this is a form that might get sent to you, and you might need to email that to the buyer and include this information in it. It's kind of a more formalized request form that makes sure that you have all of the information that you need. Even if you don't submit this form directly, it would be helpful to go ahead and kind of follow some of the information that they have in here. So is it an on-time prepaid charge? What is the amount for it? What POs are you going to need in that? Do you want it paid back? If you're sending an email to your buyer, I would only send an email to your buyer if you're wanting it paid back. But this might be a form that you guys see. Okay, so how do you dispute OTIF fines on HighRadius? So this is the newest way to actually go and dispute fines. If you see that it fails with your buyer, or you decide that you don't want to jeopardize your relationship with them, HighRadius is a great option for that. So what this looks like is taking a step back. The OTIF tools can actually be broken up into 2 key segments. So it's going to be the OTIF scorecard and HighRadius. The OTIF scorecard is going to give you visibility into what your OTIF score is and where you're being impacted. HighRadius is actually going to be where you go and dispute it, and you're going to see those fines come through. And again, you're going to dispute after the fines are issued, not before. Okay, so how to find the OTIF scorecard. So you're going to open your browser, you're going to clear the cache, cookies, internet history to make sure that you have the latest version of Retail Link. There are so many memes on the Walmart Supplier Support Group. If you guys are not familiar with that, it's a Facebook group called the Walmart Supplier Support Group on trying to get Retail Link to work. I highly suggest going and checking that out, if not for the memes, for all of the information. But this is really a step that you guys are either familiar with or should be doing if you're not seeing some of these apps show up in your Retailing. But from there, you're going to log into Retailing, and then at the top, you're going to click Apps, and then you're going to click OTIF Scorecard. I highly suggest you see in this example where there's like a little star where you can favorite. I would favorite. That just makes it easier for you to find next time. Okay, so what is the OTIF process for HighRadius? So even if the fine is disputed through HighRadius, your OTIF scorecard is not going to change. And Walmart is actually going to credit a memo, which is going to be visible in HighRadius. And so what this looks like is it's been 2 weeks after you saw the projected fine in your OTIF scorecard. It's then going to pop up in HighRadius, and it's going to be an invoice that you actually need to go and dispute, or you need to pay. So if you don't pay it inside of HighRadius, or you don't go ahead and pay off that invoice, you are going to see it be deducted from one of your following checks inside of APIS, Accounts Payable Inquiry System. So you're going to see that amount deducted, and then there's also going to be a code. It's code 99, I believe. And I don't even think that it has a description that comes along with it. Just says code 99. That's usually an OTIF charge. So they're just deducting it from your next check because you didn't pay the invoice. So inside of HighRadius, this is where you're going to be doing all of your disputes. You then need to monitor it inside of HighRadius for approval. And then you also need to make sure that you're getting paid back for that. Sometimes it can take a while for you to get paid back on OTIF charges and even deductions if you're disputing through APDP. Okay, so what is HighRadius? HighRadius is a customer-facing tool. It's actually a third party that Walmart has paid their services in order to provide software to kind of go and dispute these deductions and to handle their AR charges. So HighRadius also has other solutions and everything, but this is a solution that they provide to Walmart. And so HighRadius, gives you visibility into your accounts receivables balances, and what you need to pay to Walmart. And if you don't, then they're deducting it from your next check. If you guys do not have access to HighRadius, the best way to get access to that is actually to email, and we'll post that or send that to you guys. It's HighRadCS@walmart.com. Most people are actually going to have an account if you're doing business with Walmart. But if you don't, emailing that, they should be able to go and get you fixed up. Okay, so what do we know about HighRadius? So you can dispute OTIF fines on HighRadius using the dispute button, which we'll show that here in a second. Fines are disputed in a 1-month batch. So just like you're receiving OTIF fines in a 1-month batch, you're going to be disputed in 1 month. You're going to be disputing in a 1-month batch. And then you have a 13-month window to dispute invoice fines. So you have up to 13 months to actually go and win some of that money back. This is different than with AP deductions. So with AP deductions, you have a 2-year window, but with OTIF fines, you only have a 13-month window. So it's a good thing to keep in mind. You need to make sure that you're keeping up with them a lot at a higher cadence, a more regular cadence than you are with your AP deductions. Okay, so what else do we know about HighRadius? So disputes are actually sent to associates directly. I think that you can actually see their name whenever it comes back. You can see who is actually like approving your dispute, which is really interesting. So there's actual people who are reviewing what you're disputing and making a judgment call on it. So that's a good thing to keep knowing. It's not a system. It's not a software or an algorithm that is, judging if you should win money back or not. It is actually people who are going and doing it manually. The feedback backup is usually provided via email to whoever created the dispute. So whoever created the dispute is actually going to be getting that email. So if you have someone who leaves your team and then there's feedback or backup is requested, it's really important that you guys still have access to that email so that you can go and see any of that communication that is coming through. Generally, turnaround times are quicker, so less than a month so far. That's great. We actually have a whole lot of information on benchmarking AP deductions again with Walmart, and sometimes there's deductions that aren't getting paid back for 60 days. So less than a month is pretty quick for getting some insight into your OTIF fines.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in here, Melody, while we're on that point as well. It has kind of been a learning process for HighRadius, I think, as well as us with Supply Pike, but we have seen them kind of change their processes, and also that turnaround time has gone to even less than 2 weeks as of recently in the past couple of months. So it was slower, like over a month originally, but I think they've kind of added more people to look at these disputes and are putting more attention towards it to kind of help the suppliers out in this case.
That's great. 2 weeks. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. Can they do that with AP deductions? I feel like that would make everyone a lot happier.
Very nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so what is the HighRadius dispute format? So what you're going to need is, again, just like with your buyer, you're going to need to know all of the PO numbers that you're wanting to dispute. You're going to want to know the item numbers. So this is really helpful for any in full charges that you're wanting to dispute. You know, I'm wanting to dispute this item on this PO just so that they can match up. Okay, this is what we were saying. We didn't receive. They need to be able to match that up in their system. We need supporting documentation, detailed dispute reasoning. Again, this is just like whenever you're having a conversation with your buyer, just making sure you're providing all of the insights that you can in order to like make your case. And again, you're making it to a person, so providing that in a format that would be easy for them to understand and convincing enough to say like, yes, this absolutely should not be the case. We should reverse this. Good thing to make note is the charge type. So kind of again, like what we talked about with that buyer request backup form, you know, that's a helpful thing. Again, just more information that they can kind of look at, and they know, okay, they're disputing this in full charge on this PO with these item numbers, and then how much you actually want to be paid back. And Parker, sorry to jump in here, but correct me if I'm wrong, we've actually seen some suppliers win back more money than they actually disputed.
Yes, that is actually correct. So we have been disputing through our app, and we identify some invalid fines, but yeah, that full month invoice, even though we don't deem it to be invalid, we'll submit, you know, maybe $500, and sometimes HighRadius will pay back 1,000 or more. And those numbers are kind of all over the place. So we've seen, you know, this numerous times for many suppliers, but yeah, it has been a trend where HighRadius kind of runs their own query through their own backend data along with what we send in. And so, yeah, they review your file and what you're disputing, but they also kind of run a background check on their own to check out other POs that may need payback as well from what they can find. So it's nice of them to do that.
Yeah, that's really nice. Again, like with AP deductions, they definitely do not do that. So, you know, them going through and paying back a little bit more. I don't know how long that's going to be here to stay, but for now, that's kind of a trend that we're seeing. Awesome. Thank you for that, Parker. Okay, so additional helpful dispute documentation. Screenshots. When would screenshots be helpful? Well, if your buyer communicated something to you through email that could be helpful in this situation, you know, saying that they would waive fines, or that, you know, they knew that you were going to be impacted in some way. I have heard from quite a few suppliers that it is very difficult to get their buyer to write anything in email that might be used later for this type of case. So one good practice that I usually suggest that works for some people, or it doesn't work for everyone, but if you do have like a phone call with your buyer, you know, talking about OTIF fines, emailing them afterwards, following up with them and just saying, this is what we talked about. Later on, that might be useful information for you to go and reference in a case like this. Again, documentation, any research that you've done around this, or communication with Walmart partners, really anything that will allow for you to kind of make your case. Hopefully that's helpful for you guys. Okay, some other helpful dispute data is going to be your host PO numbers. And I actually asked Parker before this. I was like, what is a host PO number? I need to make sure that I understand that. So it's just another 10-digit number used to categorize POs. So usually people won't use that name. They won't usually say host POs. They'll just call it POs. It's just overall the PO number where individual PO lines can be under. So that's a good thing to keep in note. Item numbers, again, charge type and charge amount data for all disputes. And again, item numbers are especially important for in full disputes. Documentation on any extenuating circumstances, whether the DC that burnt down last, what was that in August, documentation around that, that's also going to be really helpful. We'll go over some of those examples right here in a second. Perfect. All right, we're making good time. Okay, so disputing OTIF chargebacks, what are good cases, dispute cases that you can go and make to HighRadius or to your buyer? So any issues that are Walmart's fault. Walmart does make mistakes, especially whenever it comes to supply chain and DCs and transportation. And so documentation in any of these cases are extremely key. Again, if your buyer does have anything in writing that they email to you, that could be helpful for your OTIF fine going disputing that, making sure that you're providing as much communication whenever that is coming up, and then having them confirm it can be really helpful for you later on. It's gonna go a long way if you let them know that something's going to be late and they say, okay, that's fine, some sort of acknowledgement of that. Like I was talking about before, if there's an act of God or something just crazy, completely unforeseeable that happens, a black swan event, we've even seen people just attach articles to some of these black swan events, like a DC burning down or like a hurricane, just letting them know, like, hey, this is an OTIF fine. This wasn't something that I can control. Can I get this reversed? And we have seen success with that. Or even Walmart has before, with hurricanes or really crazy weather events, they have waived the fines for a lot of the suppliers who were experiencing that. So that can be really helpful. Okay, so what are other possible dispute scenarios? So if the DCs are full for prepaid orders, so if you try to send your items to the DC and Walmart won't accept them because they just have too much stuff. This was especially the case for whenever Walmart ordered a whole lot of stuff during COVID, and now all of that stuff was now arriving from China. And so, we saw all of those stories about, trailers just being dropped off in parking lots, even Walmart parking lots, and just having a difficult time kind of working through those orders. Another very, very common case that I've heard a lot about is if Walmart misses the pickups for collect orders. If that happens, there is an entire kind of process that you need to be going through that. Again, that is information that we can send out. There's a whole webinar on it. I think it's called oh goodness, I forget, but it's pink. I remember the colors. It's pink instead of blue the blue and green we have here. But there's a whole process that you can go and follow for if Walmart misses pickups for collect orders. That should help kind of mitigate some of those fines that you're experiencing. If there's any discrepancies in Walmart's internal systems, again, Walmart makes mistakes. There might be data that kind of conflicts from one source to another. That's also something that you can use to your benefit. And then again, if there's any unpredictable weather, that's something that you're not going to be able to control. An important thing here, one thing that we always stress, is just communicate those issues as they pop up with your Walmart team. Communicate that with your buyer. Let them know, I'm experiencing this issue. Can you, what should I do about it? Communication is very key when dealing with Walmart. Okay, so there could be a partially approved OTIF dispute, which is interesting. What this happens is whenever a DSS, the DSS app, reflects that a PO has been received, but the OTIF scorecard shows the PS is not in full with a fine. So this is what we were talking about before, where the different systems may not align. So DSS says that it's been received, and then your OTIF scorecard so that it's not in full. So this is something that you can actually go and dispute. Genpact has mentioned that other suppliers that they don't accept proofs of delivery, which is PODs, including bills of lading, which is BOLs, or advanced shipping notices, which are ASNs, as backup for in full charges, which is very different than if you're going and disputing with AP through APDP. So if you're disputing a not in full charge or a shortage related deduction in APDP, those are usually the documents that they need. However, in the case of OTIF, they don't want those documents, which I find so interesting. But we have seen success with suppliers using DSS. So, okay, other scenarios. This is going to be, okay, so if, this is also a very common thing, you guys. So let's say before, whenever we were talking about how fines can really stack up. So you can be receiving a AP deduction, you can be receiving an OTIF fine and a SWEP fine. And so suppliers will actually go and dispute an OTIF fine in HighRadius that they were actually able to win money back for an AP deduction or maybe a SWEP fine on the same PO for the same issue. Walmart is almost like triple dipping on the same PO, same issue. So because the compliance programs don't interact, you can have a dispute resolution in APDP, but you may not see the same result in something like HighRadius for OTIF. There's no communication for that. One thing you can do though is send that information on your AP deduction or whatever compliance program actually got the deduction paid back. Use it as evidence. Just see if that's something that they're going to accept. The Walmart applications don't communicate with each other. There is no data that is shared between them. So it's not going to happen automatically. That's going to be something that you're going to need to do. And then, call out those discrepancies with your buyer because again, if it's been proven true or proven false in one area, that's something that you can leverage for another compliance program. Okay, so best practices, we're wrapping it up here. Communicate issues with your Walmart team, document any of the circumstances like we've talked about. Your buyer is going to be your primary contact. Again, goal is always going to be prevention for OTIF. You should not rely on OTIF disputing. It is not a great way to try to manage any revenue loss that you might be impacting your business. Prevention is always going to be the goal with OTIF. But Walmart makes mistakes and things happen. You're going to dispute fines before they're issued with your buyer whenever you feel like that's a great option for you. And if not, you're going to rely on HighRadius. OTIF fines, like I mentioned before, are usually issued around 5 weeks after month's end. However, we don't have the newest schedule for 2023 or fiscal year for Walmart 2024. We don't have that yet, but we will try to send that to you guys once we have it. And then Walmart data is always 1 to 2 weeks behind. So your Walmart OTIF score might be updating as they're getting additional information. It's really important that you're in there and you're double checking. Okay, so OTIF customer service and further help. So this is the email that I mentioned earlier that if you don't have access to Walmart OTIF, this is what you're going to email in order to, sorry, not Walmart OTIF. If you don't have access to HighRadius, this is the email that you're going to use. Just email them, let them know I'm not seeing my HighRadius login and they'll be able to help you. There's a number that you guys can go and call that should be able to help you with any kind of like internal issues that you're having, and then the contact center. So all of those might be good additional resources for you. And now we jump into Q&A. Are you ready, Parker? You ready, Peter? Do we have any questions?
We do not have any questions from the chat or the Q&A right off the bat. So I think we can go ahead and head into the demo. Parker, is there anything else that you wanted to add on the kind of general discussion front first?
Yeah, I guess one last point I would like to add here is that one thing that's interesting, if you do win a dispute through HighRadius, they are not going to go back and update your OTIF scores. So let's say you had 97% compliance, and you disputed that 3% that you got fined for. They're not going to go back and update your scores to say you had 100% for that month. So it's definitely important when you talk to your buyers to kind of remember that. So if you ever do win a dispute, and your scores, may not reflect what they truly were if you did win those disputes. So just something to keep in mind when you talk with your buyer, when you have reviews and stuff like that, that if there were invalid fines, you actually may have been more compliant than Walmart gives you credit for, and they're not going to go back and fix that.
Yeah, that's a great point to make. Thank you, Parker.
We had one Morgan in the chat just wanted to ask the question again, when will the slides be coming out? Those will be the next 3 to 4 business days, roughly. Same thing for the video. The video for this recording will be posted on YouTube in roughly the same amount of time as well.
Thank you. One last thing that I wanted to make note of before we jump over to the demo is that, like Peter has been sending through the chat, we have a lot of information on Supplier Wiki, but we even have an entire book on OTIF fines. It's over 100 pages, so please go and check that out. That is the complete guide to OTIF. If you have any questions, it's just a helpful little manual. We even have physical copies. I don't have that one physical copy here in front of me, but this is an example of what it would look like. We have one for Amazon deductions. So if that's something that is interesting to you guys, go and check that out. If you're located in Northwest Arkansas, please come to one of our upcoming in-person events, because we do hand out our books on all the retailers and all of the compliance fines at those events. So perfect. These are our emails. If you have any questions, please view us at supplypike.com. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then hand it over to Parker.
Awesome. Can we see that all right here?
Yeah, it looks great. And thank you everyone for joining us today, if this is where you drop off.
Yes, thank you everyone. Once again, my name is Parker. I work with the OTIF product team here at Supply Pike. And so we'll go through our process for disputing fines within our app and show you around. So as you can kind of see, we have our OTIF main dashboard here. These are showing kind of fines over each month throughout the past year. We can also look at compliance trends. So you can see when you are meeting that 98% goal, you are going to get fined for each of these kind of months. And so when you look at these fines over time, we can kind of pick one of these months and go through a scenario. But September is a good example here. So we can see we had both prepaid and in full fines here. And as far as our app, we are identifying possibly invalid fines automatically for you. So once you can see that it's kind of a smaller piece of the pie in some scenarios. There are also cases where your whole month could be invalid based on the data we're pulling in, but we'll go through more what that looks like here at the end. But yeah, both prepaid and in full, there are scenarios. So like for prepaid, you may have a callback request where there were no appointments available and you tried to reschedule your shipments at the proper time, but Walmart didn't approve it. And so you got fined for that when you shouldn't have been fined. But as far as in full, we can kind of look at this one here and click on this link. And so here's our orders page, which kind of shows the POs for a certain month. So we're looking at September here for in full. And so what our app does is it identifies scenarios where we think that you guys did ship more than Walmart's getting you credit for. So you guys were more in full than what Walmart says you were. And so when we scroll over here and look at the data, so you can see the cases that were ordered, what ASN says we were shipping versus what OTIF cases received is showing. And so this OTIF cases received is the number that Walmart uses to kind of grade you. But in this scenario, you can see that ASN shipped was 1 case higher. So you guys said you shipped 1 case more than what Walmart's giving you credit for. And so we would dispute that in this scenario. And so our app, you can just check that line, or this filter right here is already set up to kind of collect all of these scenarios where that ASN number would be higher than OTIF cases received. And so you would just select all POs to dispute that. Now, there's also another scenario we mentioned in the webinar today, which is DSS. So same kind of thing. DSS is actually a Walmart additional source of data that tracks received amounts. And so if that number is also higher than this OTIF case received, you can dispute that as well. So the ASN ship is kind of like using your word against OTIF based on what you guys said you shipped on those ASN or advanced ship notices, versus DSS, which is just a secondary Walmart source of data that you can look at and dispute based off their word against their own word. So it's Walmart against themselves, basically, when you go that route. And so our app kind of has those broken down here where we say that, you know, those DSS scenarios are definitely likely invalid if it's Walmart's word against themselves. But that ASN, where it's your word against Walmart, is less likely to get approved, but still kind of worthwhile to go after in some cases. And so, yeah, as far as disputing goes, once again, you can just select the PO number or the PO checkbox here, highlights all these POs that kind of fall into those scenarios based on the filter you have set up. And then when you hit dispute POs, we kind of get like a little checkout screen when you're shopping, and it just kind of summarizes the dispute overall. So you can see you're looking at September here. The food in full is our metric here. So we're disputing the in full charges. Our dispute amount auto fills in. Incorrect billing is what you're going to post to HighRadius. So if you were in HighRadius disputing this, you would select incorrect billing. And then we automatically attach this comment here as to why we think they're invalid, but you're welcome to kind of adjust these as much as you want. And then we also automatically create this kind of Excel file here that has all this kind of data wrapped up real nice, and it looks like a retail link type format that looks familiar to HighRadius when they look through it. And it's as simple as clicking submit dispute. So I'm not going to go ahead and do that today on this account, but yeah, that's the whole process though. Pretty simple. Goes through all that we talked about, where these scenarios of discrepancies prove that they may be invalid. And so like we said, the ASN or DSS are kind of the route you can go with that for in full versus prepaid. You know, we have these different compliance issues of being early or late, and we can look at callbacks where you guys tried to move the shipment back into a certain time frame, but Walmart didn't approve it, and so we think that was invalid. So that also gets attached in the same file like the other scenario. But yeah, that's we keep it really simple and like to make it super easy. So as far as kind of navigating month to month, we'll have these kind of invalid fines identified as you kind of go throughout. In this scenario, obviously, like I said, it's a small piece of the pie, and we don't see a ton of invalid fines based on the data, but there are scenarios where it can be, you know, way closer to this total amount here for the actual fines that were received by your company. But yeah, that is mostly it though. So thank you.
Alrighty, thank you, Parker, for that demo. One thing I just wanted to kind of add in, just for any of you who are kind of interested as well, if the demo is exciting to you, go ahead and sign up for a free trial as well. We would love to get your data in there and show you how much you can be saving, or how much where kind of some of those pain points are for you, just to see if it's something that might make sense for your business or not.
And one thing I'll add to that is that, you know, there's a lot of really great data inside of this and analysis that you can do to, again, be working through that prevention aspect of OTIF. And we have a really fantastic team like Parker, like our customer success team, that they'll look at your data and walk through it with you and give you some suggestions, high level, as well as, you know, documentation like these webinars or some help articles on how you can actually go through and work through some of those issues. So prevention in disputing is a key thing that we do here at SupplyPike for anything around revenue loss. So if this is interesting to you, like what Peter said, please jump on a free, it's about a 14-day trial, pull in your data. We'll talk through, you know, all of the issues that you might be experiencing and how we would be able to help you. So. Perfect. All right. Well, I think that's it. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. We are ending right on time, you guys. That's great. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Parker, for joining today. Super excited. That was a great webinar. So thank you, guys. I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of your day.